All right. Hello, guys. Welcome to the video. Today we're going to be going over the Tenet Spirex. Let's get into it here. Now, in this weapon series, I take a weapon, I build it out, and I test that weapon on its own merits, meaning I don't mix the weapon with any kind of external factors like Warframe abilities, Warframes doing damage, pets putting statuses on. I just test the weapon by itself, and I leave it up to the viewer to make their own like intelligent conclusions, like, hey, Salt put fire rate on this weapon, but I'm using Wisp that gives me fire rate. Maybe I don't need fire rate. Or, Salt put viral on this weapon, and I'm using Nourish, so I don't, maybe I can use corrosive instead of viral. Things like that. So we're just going to test the weapon by itself, built out. So today is the Tenet Spirex. It is a secondary pistol. It shoots out a bullet that explodes. It's got like a 2-ish meter radius of explosion. Let's get into the build here. So, innate things about this weapon, it has kind of like a little special, unique trait here that, sometimes you get an effect out of and sometimes you don't. It's whatever. So landing a headshot increases your reload speed by plus 25% for 4 seconds, and it stacks 2 times. And you should be going for headshots with this weapon. That being said, it has a very low magazine. That's why you're going for headshots, but at the same time, you don't really want to be holding your shots. Like, you just want to shoot when you can. So sometimes you don't always get a headshot, and that's okay. But that's its like little unique effect, is that sometimes you get some extra reload speed out of it. The other unique things about it, not really that much, other than it just has a radial attack. So it does, its direct damage against its main target, and then it has a radial attack that's about like a 2 meter, yeah, right here, 2 meter radius. So let's get into the build, and we'll explain a little bit more of the unique things about this that I can't really explain from its data sheet. So we're going to be using galvanized diffusion for multi-shot. We're going to be using galvanized crosshairs for crit chance. We're going to be using Hornet Strike for flat damage. And now this is where the Spirex really, really shines. And I think Hemorrhage, like this weapon, the Tenet Spirex, is the best example of where Hemorrhage like works the best on. So let's read this here. Impact status effects have a 35% chance to apply a slash status effect. And then you get 2 times the effect when the fire rate is below 2.5. So for Hemorrhage to be good on a weapon, there usually has to be 2 things that happens. There has to be a weapon that has under a 2.5 fire rate, and it has to be a weapon, usually, that produces forced impact procs. There's a difference between forced and natural impact procs. Now, the Tenet Spirex, the other unique thing about this is the direct shot. So when you're aiming at a dude, when you hit that dude, it will produce a forced impact proc. What that means is it doesn't matter what your status chance is. So your status chance could be 0, and the guy is still going to get an impact proc on him. Your out of all your statuses, it could have rolled to give you viral. That's cool. It's going to give you viral and an impact proc. Like, you're always going to get an impact proc on your target that you are directly shooting. So that's what a forced impact proc is. Now let's go over what a natural impact proc is. A natural impact proc is you have an 88% status chance. So whenever you shoot, you have an 88% chance to produce a status, and it's going to roll. It's going to kind of like do a dice roll of all these statuses here. And if it picks impact, that's great. That's a natural impact proc that happened because of just regular status chance. Well, the cool thing about the Spirex is that it has a very high impact rating. So not only does this produce forced impact procs when it hits a target, but it has a higher than normal chance to produce additional natural impact procs. Of course, when you have your viral on here, the viral weighting is going to be double of what the impact is. And it might be more than that too, and I'll explain. So the Tenet Spirex, it's a Tenet weapon. Just like the Kuva weapons, they can get a progenitor element. Now, your progenitor element will increase or add an element that is on the weapon. Now, the Spirex is one of the very few cases, maybe even the only case, where the impact progenitor is actually very good. And in fact, that's what I have on this weapon, is I have an impact progenitor. What that does is it increases my impact weighting, so I end up getting more slash procs. Now, when we get to the elements here and we get to like some of the alternatives, there is a variant to this build that uses a toxin progenitor. That your options for progenitors on this weapon are going to be toxin and impact. That's it. There's really nothing else that's going to be better than that. I personally have an impact. It's going to increase my impact weighting. It's going to let hemorrhage get even more slash procs out of it. But if you wanted to do the toxin build, your impact might just look a little bit lower. Your impact might be like, I'm just kind of guessing here, it might be like 200 instead of 300. And so you're still going to get some natural impact procs, but it's going to be a lot less. Same thing with the radial. The radial is even like weighted worsely here, where your impact is 124 and your viral is 456, and this is with an impact progenitor. So if you don't have an impact progenitor, your radials might not really get impacts very often. And that's okay. The toxin progenitor build is still very good too, and I'll go over both of them. So hemorrhage, amazing. It is amazing on this weapon. This weapon is probably like the best example of using hemorrhage. So, and again, it has to have under a 2.5 fire rate. 2.33, perfect. Now I want to show you something too about hemorrhage, because Lethal Torrent is a popular fire rate mod that goes on most secondary weapon builds. So I'm just going to put it where Frostbite is. So if I put Lethal Torrent on here, look at that. It goes from 2.33 to 3.73, and we no longer get the 2 times bonus from hemorrhage. So Lethal Torrent is not an option, and it will never be an option on the Spirex, unfortunately. I mean, multi-shot's great, and I wouldn't mind shooting quicker, but hemorrhage is just so freaking good on this weapon that you can't afford to do that. So we're going to put Frostbite there. Okay. Let me stop running my mouth and go to the other mods here. We're going to have Prime Pistol Gambit for crit chance. We're going to have Prime Target Cracker for crit damage. Now I'm going to run my mouth a little bit about Prime Pistol Gambit, because there's another option here, and that's going to be Critical Creeping Bullseye. I did testing. That's why I have a lot of misformas. So never follow exactly where I have my formas, because they're probably wrong, because I do a lot of testing. Obviously, when you're building this out, just put your formas on whatever is the most expensive mod, pretty much. So, Creeping Bullseye is a 200% crit chance over a 187 crit chance. Not that big of a difference, but I'll tell you what the differences are, because, again, I did testing with it. So Prime Pistol Gambit is going to start in yellow crits. You're not going to see any oranges. Creeping Bullseye is going to start in yellow crits with some oranges. So you will immediately see oranges with Creeping Bullseye. Now, at the very end, when you're at 5 stacks of Galvanized Crosshairs with Prime Pistol Gambit, and you're at 5 stacks of Crosshairs with Creeping Bullseye, there's not much of a difference. It's like 80% orange crits and like 20% yellow crits, or maybe like 70-30. You're getting mostly oranges, a little bit of yellows. So at the end, when you're at like full Galv Crosshairs, they both kind of act the same. Now, what doesn't act the same is the fire rate. So Creeping Bullseye on most weapons doesn't matter. 20% fire rate doesn't really affect most weapons. It's like, whatever. The weapon already shoots kind of quick. But this weapon already starts with low fire rate. So a minus 20% fire rate decrease feels even worse. It feels really, really bad. You put like a minus 20% fire rate on like the Kuva Carrick, which is an assault rifle, you don't even friggin' notice a difference on it. But you put that minus 20% fire rate on a weapon that's already shooting really slow, and it hurts. It really hurts to use it. So the big difference between Gambit and Bullseye is just Bullseye starts with no Galv stacks at like some orange crits. I think it's just better to use Prime Pistol Gambit. Yeah, you're not going to start with orange crits, but like 1 or 2 headshots in, you're going to be at oranges for like the rest of the game. So I think Prime Pistol Gambit is better than Creeping Bullseye, but I just wanted to put that information out there to let you make your own decision. Prime Target Cracker for crit damage. And then we're going to be going for Frostbite and Pistol Pestilence for our 60/60 cold and 60/60 toxin to make viral. Now, for Whisper's content, viral is very bad. Enemies are resistant and immune to viral procs. And so for Whispers, you want to use corrosive for the best general element. Now, when we got to these elements here is kind of where I wanted to explain the other progenitor option, which is toxin. So having the impact progenitor that I do, this is what my build looks like. Now, having a toxin progenitor, and it's going to be toxin, it's not going to be cold, and there's a reason for that. So if you have a toxin progenitor, so we'll take off toxin, so we wouldn't need toxin anymore, you would just have cold and it would mix with the progenitor toxin. It'll give you an extra mod slot. So now let me go back and explain why it's toxin and not cold as the progenitor. So you need to be able to switch between whispers and non-whispers. And it makes it easier when you get a toxin progenitor to be able to just move the 60/60 cold to a 60/60 electric. And you can simply switch between viral and corrosive that way. Super easy. If you went with a cold progenitor, you can't do that. Now you're like doing weird shit to your build to try to make corrosive. So with a toxin progenitor, it's just one mod slot. You can switch it around between electric or cold to make corrosive or to make viral, whatever you want to use for whatever content you're doing. So that's why toxin or impact are the only options on this weapon. So now, if you chose a toxin progenitor, the negative things to it over the impact is that your impact weighting is going to be less. You're going to get less natural impact procs, and your radial attack, your explosion, is going to not really produce that many impact procs, which again, hemorrhage converts them into slash. And this weapon has a respectable enough, it's a little bit lower now, but 2,637, has a respectable enough damage profile where the slash procs you get are actually pretty friggin' big. Like one slash proc will, maybe two, like one or two slash procs will insta-kill a Steel Path enemy. So, like, keep that in mind. So if you go with Toxin, the positives are that you get an extra mod slot. The negatives is that you have a lower impact weighting. You're still going to get your forced impact procs. You're still going to get pretty respectable amounts of natural impact procs on the main target, but that radial attack, it was even less. It was like a 1 out of 4 times you're going to get an impact proc, so that's going to be hurting even more. Now, for that slot, if you went with Toxin, you have an extra mod slot. That is a perfect slot for a Riven. So if you have a Riven for the Spirex, or if you plan to get a Riven for the Spirex, Toxin might be the best way to go for a progenitor. If you don't really care, if you're just building the Spirex out because you're trying to get mastery, Impact's super good. Super freaking good. But if you had a Riven, this is where it would go, right here. Perfect spot for it. Other than that, like that last mod slot, it's difficult. Like, I mean, you could do Magnum Force. It's not really that good. I don't really like to mess with the accuracy on this weapon because you do want to try to be getting headshots. I'm going to type in critical here, and I'll show you the other one. I believe it's Sharpened Bullets. Yep. So Sharpened Bullets is the other option for this mod slot, which would be on kill. You get a little bit more crit damage when you're aiming. You're always going to be aiming with this weapon. The crit multiplier is kind of like average. So, like, I mean, this is still good, but like it's not like like the Kuvanu course starts really high. So anything you can do to increase your crit damage is amazing. This is like more average-ish. So like Sharpened Bullets would probably be what you would put here if you don't have a Riven. If you have a Riven, 100%, bam, you'd put it right there. So, but that is with the Toxin Progenitor. I just wanted to go over that because there are like 2 different ways to build this. So I'm going to go back to my little Impact Progenitor build. So I'm going to, what do I have? Frostbite. I got to type in Toxin. We'll put that 60/60 on there. So we got Cold, Toxin, Viral, perfect. And then in the Exilus slot, we're going to be putting Steady Hands for reduced weapon recoil. This weapon does have a pretty big kick. And for the Arcane, we're going for Secondary Merciless for a 360% damage increase. and a 30% reload speed increase. Now, the other option is secondary deadhead. I feel like Merciless is a little bit better on this weapon. So you're going to be going for headshots anyway, so like you could go with deadhead. But you produce so many kills through the actual AoE of this weapon. So it's kind of back and forth there. It's kind of back and forth. If you went with secondary deadhead, you could use something else in the Exilus slot because you wouldn't need the negative weapon recoil because you would get the negative weapon recoil with deadhead. There's just not really much else that's great in the Exilus slot to put there. So I'm going to go with secondary Merciless. The good thing about that too is that it has a really low magazine of 8, so it just lets you like get right back into shooting after you shoot those 8. So that's kind of up to you, whatever you want to use for an arcane. All right, I think that was enough explanation on this thing here. So let us, we have the Tenet Spirex. What we're going to do is we're going to do a 10-minute Kuva survival on Steel Path, of course. I didn't explain this that I usually do. So because we're not mixing this with any external factors, I'm going to be doing this on a Big Dumb Inaros with no Archon Shards. No mods that affect weapon damage. No arcanes that affect weapon damage. A pet with no sentinel weapon, and no mods on the pet that affect weapon damage. That way we just get a good old check of the actual weapon. Okay, right into Steel Path Kuva Survival. We're going to do 10 minutes here. We're going to kill some trash, kill some acolytes, and then we're going to do 10 minutes into Lua Conjunction, and then that'll give us a good view on the weapon. So I'm going to cast my 4 to double my armor, and that'll be the last time I use an ability. If there's any reason I need to use a ammo pad, I'll also make sure I say so, but I don't believe this weapon is going to have ammo issues.
Predictable. As expected, Grenier have shut down the environmental.
It shoots kind of slow, and it has a lot of kill potential, so it doesn't really struggle for ammo too much. So again, it's going to start at yellows. And then after, after just like 1 or 2 stacks of Valve Scope, you start seeing arches. We're already seeing arches there. For a long time, this was my favorite weapon on Inaros. Because the positive thing with Inaros, a lot of Warframes, they want to use their Archon shard slots to like min-max their builds. You know, like if you're playing Protea, you want to put like ability strength to, get even more out of your little grenades and stuff like that. Well, Inaros has really shitty abilities, so you don't care at all about that. So you don't really need your Archon shards for anything. And so you're able to use those, the red ones that give you secondary crit chance, primary status chance. You're able to use those ones. And so for a long time, I used this weapon with a Naros with 5 red secondary crit chance shards. And with that, I was able to get red crit. So instead of like, yellows and oranges, I was at reds with this. So it was really good on Inaros. Just because of that, because he doesn't care about his Archon shards, because he has horrible abilities that don't really need anything. And then, of course, the Strun Incarnon came out, and that was the day everything changed. That became the best Inaros weapon. Well, I mean, if you're trying to theme a weapon with Inaros. If you just want big damage, put the Torrent on every single Warframe and never build anything else. It's kind of boring that way, though. So if I could find a big, thick Eximus, I want to show off the slash proc potential of this weapon. And, how much damage the slash procs actually do. Oh, there's one right there. Okay, so I'm going to just shoot him twice, and we'll see how he does with it. All right, I shot him 3 times. So you have 6 slash procs. All right, that wasn't super impressive. I might have not been at a high Galv scope stack. Sometimes the slash procs should be a little bit more impressive than that usually. So let's get at a higher Galv scope stack. I'm still seeing a lot of oranges. You know, of course, if your aim is better than mine, you're gonna be at higher Galv scope stacks all the time. I am not the best aimer. As you can see, I'm at 1 stack right now out of 5. That's why 4 stacks now. Maybe I'm at 5. Nope, still at 4. Sometimes when I start talking, I forget to actually aim. Alright, we have the Acolyte coming. This weapon, if I remember correctly, it does very good against the Acolyte. Haven't used it in a little bit just because, well, I mean, I tested with it, of course, but other than testing, I haven't used it in actual gameplay against Acolytes. This is Malice. So, oh my goodness, I'm going to forget about my life support now, aren't I? Oh my goodness, Salt. You've done this in a video before, too. I did. Oh my goodness. So I'm gonna let's do another 5 minutes. I'm not gonna do a full 10-minute. I'm gonna do a 5-minute here. That's embarrassing. I did that in one other video. I'll just eat it. I'll keep this video up, and just everyone can see my doofus ways. So instead of 10, we'll do 5 minutes. We'll do 5 minutes. We'll kill 1 Acolyte, and then we'll go to Lua. That way, we're not making a video too long.
Scans show
I forgot what other video I did that in.
set off the alarms to draw the
I was too busy running my mouth, and I went to 0 life support.
Predictable. As expected, Grenier have shut down the environmental systems, sending modified life support capsules. Use these to sustain your environment or attach the catalysts to begin harvesting.
Alright, before I forget again, let's move over to the life support area. Oh, it's going to be the... Oh, it's not too bad of an area here, actually. As you can see, a lot of your damage is actually the radial. So it does very respectable damage with the radial attack. And because of the high impact, the radial can also produce impact, which creates slashes, which do even more damage to the dudes. I think I had the Arbiters of Hexus spawn behind me. I think Merciless is really good. I mean, like, look at this reload. This reload is with Merciless and with sometimes having the passive buff on for this weapon, like its unique little thing. And it's still like kind of slow, so I think I'm happy with Merciless. I don't think I would switch it to Deadhead. I think Deadhead's still an option, but I think like I think Merciless is better, personally. I know I say this a lot of times in a lot of videos, but I kind of repeat a lot of stuff just because maybe not everyone watches all videos, of course. But the slash procs and the damage slash procs do is based on the damage of the weapon. So if you have a high damage weapon, your slash procs are going to be very high damage. If you have a very low damage weapon, your slash procs are going to be very low damage. And that's why, like, hemorrhaging hunter munitions is not always a go-to on every single weapon. And it's just because certain weapons, they don't produce respectable damage. They're extremely high DPS, but they produce very small damage. You know, like the Kuva Carrack is one I always talk about. It's a fast-firing assault rifle. And then it also, like, there's not always a right answer. There's not always a right answer, like, hunter munitions always best and serration always bad. That's not really how the game works. You have to figure out what you want to do and what kind of content you want to do. And then that will tell you what mods are better than what. So, like, hunter munitions, like, let's say on the Kuva Carrack. Hunter munitions is bad on the Kuva Carrack. But if you're doing level cap for some reason with the Kuva Carrack, I don't know why you would, but if you're doing level cap with the Kuva Carrack, hunter munitions might all of a sudden be good on it, because now you're getting true damage, you're bypassing all the crazy damage reduction that those super high enemies are going to have, and now hunter munitions, I mean, it's still going to be producing shitty damage, but you're going to be producing more damage through it than your regular stuff, because your regular stuff is having to go through that target's damage reduction. And the same thing with serration. Like, most people, like, they poop on serration. They go, oh, serration bad, hunter munitions good. And that's not always the right answer, because on, like, these enemies, for instance, you know, maybe like 1-2 hours into Steel Path, a lot of times, serration will beat out hunter munitions. You know, even though it sounds kind of dumb, it will. And it's just because enemies in lower Steel Path, like, and by lower Steel Path, I'm talking like sitting in a mission for 2 hours. Like, sitting in a mission for 2 hours, enemies are still dying in less than a second most of the time when you're beaming headshots on them. And hunter munitions takes a second for it to even start doing its damage from its initial shot. So, so we're at 5 minutes here. So at 5 minutes, we're at 191 kills. At 10 minutes, we're usually seeing ourselves on average weapons at like 400. 350 to 400. So this is potentially average or above average. Of course, I kind of screwed up on the first run through there, and I didn't hit life support because, you know, I forget things sometimes. So let's queue up that Lua. We'll just get into that Lua there. I've actually been thinking of switching the format to doing. So right now I do Kuva Survival and then I do Lua Conjunction. I've been thinking of switching the format to start at Lua Conjunction and then go to Whispers. Not 100% sure on that though, because that would also mean I would have to show a Whispers build and a. I mean, I always give that option, like when I'm talking about weapons, but I would have to like actively be switching my build in between the video. So, like that's how I've been thinking about maybe switching the format. Just because Kuva Survival, I like it. I like testing weapons that they don't have innate armor strip, and I like testing them on the Grenier because they have like really high damage reduction. You're able to kind of see what statuses you're producing. Things aren't dying instantly. And that's why I like Kuva Survival, especially if I don't have armor strip, because I'm able to see my statuses more clearly.
Underestimate them at your peril.
Right, I'm going to cast my 4 to double my armor, and that'll be the last time I use an ability.
Stand by for life support.
I'm going to kind of cover my microphone and cough. I apologize ahead of time. All right. I've been a little bit sick lately. Before I do these videos, I like blow my nose like crazy so that it's good for like the first 15 minutes and then it starts getting bad. I don't cut though. I do like one full take because I am not tech savvy and I don't know how to actually edit videos because I'm pretty dumb. So I do my videos in one full take, so everyone gets the full effect. I will eventually learn how to edit videos. I have to switch to a different software that I use to capture videos on. The one I use now is very basic. It's like click button to turn on, click button to turn off. That's basically it. I mean, I'm still using Paint 3D to do my thumbnails. I think they look pretty good though. I think they look pretty decent for Paint 3D. Alright guys, we're going to start pulling you back in towards the life support room. Make sure there's no yellow life supports there. I'm going to head towards this room here. Probably pop one of them.
Tenno, if you have a necromag, this would be an excellent place to deploy it.
Oh yeah, we were talking about, that's right, before I ran out of life support in that other one, we were talking about mods and how sometimes they're better depending on the content you're doing. Like sometimes mods that are considered bad, like Serration, can actually be better than some of the mods that are considered good. And it's just because of the content you're doing. You have to take that into consideration. You can't just look at a level cap build and go, ooh, that's going to perform well, because it might not perform well in regular, like, 1 to 4 hours steel path. Like, most people in the game are not sitting in a survival for 9 hours to get the level cap. If you want to, that's fine. But there's going to be very specific builds for that. And if you're structuring your regular survival build around a level cap build, it might actually be weaker because of it. Like we were saying, Hunter Munitions, for instance, on low damage weapons. Hunter Munitions is amazing on like medium and high damage weapons, but on low damage weapons, Hunter Munitions is pretty crappy. But on level cap, it becomes like more and more good. I can't speak today. More and more good because enemies have such high damage reduction at those levels. And so your regular shots are now doing absolutely piss poor damage. And your Hunter Munitions that used to do piss poor damage is the only thing that's actually doing damage now. It's still doing piss poor damage, but it's the only thing that's actually doing somewhat damage because enemies have such high damage reduction. And so, like, there's a lot of instances where, like, Serration, the one that everyone makes fun of, will beat out Hunter Munitions in, like, 1 or 2 hours steel path survivals. And it's because in 1 or 2 hours steel path survivals, enemies typically will still die in less than a second. Especially trash. Maybe not Eximuses. Eximuses might still take, 3 or 4 seconds. But even at 3 or 4 seconds, Serration still might beat out Hunter Munitions. Because Hunter Munitions is only going to get 4 ticks of damage. And if the damage of the weapon is really low, that 4 ticks of damage is going to be very low. Oh, I thought I finished it. Here it is. And so with my builds, just to like, I've said it in a few videos, but not all of them. Let me not run my mouth for 1 second. Let me hit this life support. I'm going to drag violence over here. That way we don't pull a Kuva Survival 2.0. Oh, he just teleported me. That's not good. Right, I'm going to have to try to kill him quickly. Luckily, the Spirex actually is a pretty good Acolyte killer. It's not the best, but it's pretty damn good. Alright, Acolyte is dead. You're going to have to hit both of these life supports. Yeah, there was someone in the clan, in our clan the other day that was asking about like Galvanized Aptitude. That's another one where it's like sometimes Serration will actually beat out Galvanized Aptitude, especially in 1 or 2 hour Steel Path, and it just comes down to some of the, and again, a lot of times we're talking about trash enemies. Eximuses are sometimes different. If your weapon struggles with Eximuses, it might be worth going like the Hunter Munition Galvanized Aptitude route. But if they're not, if you're killing enemies in less than 1 or 2 seconds, sometimes Serration will still beat out Galvanized Aptitude and Hunter Munitions. Just because Galvanized Aptitude, for it to get its full effect, it needs to actually have status in the target. And if you're, when you're at max Galv scopes, I'm not really talking about this weapon, I'm just talking about like, I don't know, like regular assault rifles in general. When you're at like max Galv scopes, a lot of like the assault rifles in the game will just 1 or 2 shot trash, and you're not getting any effect out of Hunter Munitions or Galvanized Aptitude at that point. You're getting 0. You're basically running a weapon with 6 mods instead of 8. So it comes down to there's a lot of factors that have to be considered. What content are you doing? How long do enemies last when you're shooting them? Is this weapon good against Eximuses? Is it good against everything? Does it struggle against something? Do you want it to be better against that something, or would you rather just bring a second weapon that deals with that, weak point? The other thing with Galvanized Aptitude, is it multiplicative or is it additive? There's a whole chart on that. That's what the guy was asking yesterday. I forgot what weapon it was, but he was like, is Galvanized, should I use this there? Like, well, you kind of have to look at that Galvanized Aptitude chart because there are a few weird weapons in the game where it acts multiplicatively instead of additively. And so all of a sudden, Galvanized Aptitude, that is somewhat questionable, especially like early Steel Path, becomes amazing because it's multiplicative. It's like a no-brainer at that point. I think this weapon will get to 10 minutes. I think it might fail, though, at 10 minutes. I don't think we'll kill the second Acolyte and the Thoraxes before we run out of air. Going to have to run to that other life support. But that's kind of like the Lua conjunction test, is that is the weapon producing enough kills to live off of the yellow life supports? And in this case, it is probably not. It's doing well. It's doing very well. It just, I don't think it's producing. Oh, thanks for following, Nox. Hey, how's it going? How are you doing today?
Don't worry, I'll take very good care
We
of
got
them.
Thoraxes. These guys are going to be sucking life support, so we got to get them down quickly because we'll run out of air otherwise. We probably will run out of air anyway, but I want to try not to. I want to try to get past this 10-minute point without running out of air. We're at 18%. One more Thorax up.
We cannot let the worm have the rule.
All right, we got him down. I need to hit that life support like right this second. Maybe. Is it going to tell us we fail or no? Now we hit it. We hit it. Good, good, good. Okay, gotta try to farm as many yellows as I can. So we're actually past 10 minutes here, so we technically passed it. We're at 318 kills. 318 kills. We'll head to extraction. So when I do these tests, trying to get Zaku, yeah, Zaku is, if I remember correctly, I think he's pretty easy to get his parts. I think you just have to do the bounties. But to build his parts, you need to get all those like crappy like mining and fishing supplies, which is really annoying. I think his parts are just through bounties, which isn't too bad because the bounties on Deimos are pretty rewarding. You get, it's decent like endo, decent rewards and whatnot. But when you get to actually building those parts, it's like mining stuff. Yeah, you have all his parts. Yeah, so you're at like the mining and fishing resources, unfortunately. That's the crappy part. He's a really good Warframe, though. He is like, he doesn't even have a Prime yet, and he is top tier. He's up there with like Saren for being like like a really, really high damager. Okay, so let's go over the build one more time here before we end the video. So we're going to be doing the Tenet Spirex. I hope I was saying Spirex the whole time and not Delox. I don't know. So Tenet Spirex. It's a pistol. You get it from doing one of Parvos' sisters. Well, not technically doing the sister, but you know what I'm saying. So let's go into the build here.
Operator, you have remembered well how the Tenno arm themselves.
Okay, so the innate things about the Tenet Spirex is that it has this like little weird unique trait where after landing a headshot, it increases your reload speed by plus 25% for 4 seconds, and it stacks 2 times. That's nice, especially since it only has a magazine of 8, so you get to reload a little bit quicker. And the other unique thing that's not shown here is that the target you hit directly gets a forced impact proc. So there's a difference between forced and natural impact procs. Forced impact procs happen all the time, no matter what. If your status was 0% and your weapon was able to produce a forced impact proc, you were still going to get an impact proc. If your status was 100%, you should only produce 1 status, and like let's say it rolled viral and it's producing a viral status, you will get a viral and an impact proc because that impact proc is guaranteed because it's a forced impact proc. Natural impact procs are just regular from status chance, right? I have 88% status chance. I have an 88% chance for me to get one of these elements, and it does this little dice roll and it chooses impact. That's a natural impact proc. So this weapon produces a forced impact proc on your target that you shoot directly. So the build here is going to be Galvanized Diffusion for multi-shot, Galvanized Crosshairs for crit chance, Hornet Strike for flat damage, Hemorrhage. Now, Hemorrhage, what it does is impact status effects have a 35% chance to apply a slash status effect, and you get 2 times the effect, so 2 slash status effects, when the fire rate is below 2.5. Well, this weapon has a low fire rate at 2.33.
What are you thinking about?
So you're good there. You get 2 times the effect. It produces forced impact procs, so that's perfect. And, in fact, it has a higher than average impact rating. So you get more natural impact procs as well. So Hemorrhage is top tier on this weapon. It's amazing. Next here we have Prime Pistol Gambit and Prime Target Cracker for crit chance, crit damage. There's a little bit of a choice here with Prime Pistol Gambit. I went over it at first, but just in case anyone wasn't here or wasn't paying attention. So we have Creeping Bullseye is the other option. So this one is 200. This one is 187. They both end up with 5 stacks of Galvanized Crosshairs. They both end up doing about like 70% oranges, like 30-ish% yellow crits. But the difference is that Creeping Bullseye, you'll start with some oranges. Prime Pistol Gambit, you'll start at all yellows. You'll start with some oranges with Creeping Bullseye. I still think Prime Pistol Gambit is better because Creeping Bullseye, you also get negative 20% fire rate. Negative 20% fire rate on most weapons doesn't matter. Like you put negative 20% fire rate on like an assault rifle and you won't even really notice the difference. but you put negative 20% fire rate on a weapon that only has 2.33 fire rate, and all of a sudden it feels really, really bad. So for that reason, I think Prime Pistol Gambit wins out pretty easily there. But that's up to you. It is an option. Then in our last two slots here that we usually do our elements in, we're going for viral. So we're going to be going for the 60-60 cold and the 60-60 toxin. Now remember, in Whispers content, enemies are resistant and immune to viral, so you want to be going for corrosive. Corrosive is the best general element against Whispers enemies. And in the invisible slot here, because remember, this is a Tenet weapon. So just like Kuva weapons, you get a progenitor element. And that progenitor element, the game reads everything from left to right. And so that progenitor element kind of sits in this like area here. So just remember that when things are mixing and you're trying to figure out like how things are going to be combined, it sits like right here. So there's two options you can go, and that's going to be impact or toxin. So I have impact on this. The reason I have impact on this is because this weapon already has a higher than average impact rating, and it's just going to increase it a little bit more. And it's going to produce more natural impact procs, which are going to be converted into slash procs because of hemorrhage. Now the other option, and I think it is just as good, questionably even better, so don't, just because I have impact, don't say I need to go impact. The other one is toxin. So if we had toxin as our progenitor, so instead of having our toxin mod right here, we're going to take it off. And we'll just act as though the toxin is here because that's our progenitor now. And that's going to mix with our frostbite. Yeah, toxin is amazing. Toxin is the best specific element against Corpus. So, we're going to act as though our toxin is right here. So it's mixing with frostbite and it's making viral. So instead of having our viral be in these two mod slots, our viral is over here now. And that gives us an extra mod slot. Now, I'll explain the reason why we use toxin as our progenitor and not cold. And that's because we want to be able to switch between viral and corrosive. Because again, viral is the best general element against normal matches, games, whatever. And corrosive is the best general element against whispers. So if you're doing whispers content, all you got to do is pop off your cold, put in an electric, you type in electric, plop on jolt, bam, and now all of a sudden your jolt and your toxin progenitor are making corrosive. And then if you're doing other content, regular content that's not whispers, you just pop back on your cold mod. So type in cold, pop back on frostbite, bam. So it's easy to switch that way. That's why you choose a toxin progenitor. So your two options for progenitors for this weapon are going to be toxin, that way it's easy to switch between whispers and non-whispers, or impact, and impact is going to increase your impact weighting so you get more slash procs. Now the negative thing about going toxin is that you're going to have less natural slash procs with hemorrhage, but you gain a mod slot because now you don't have to have toxin in these two areas. You can have toxin over here in your progenitor. So that's the positive with toxin. And if you were doing that, if you had a Riven, that is a perfect spot for a Riven. Of course, Rivens are expensive. I can't fit mine there. But if you had a Riven, that's a perfect spot for a Riven right there. If you don't have a Riven, this is the other option in that slot, and it's going to be Sharpened Bullets. So Sharpened Bullets is just more crit damage, pretty much. You're always going to be aiming in with this weapon, so you don't have to really worry about that. It's just basically 75% crit damage. So 75% crit damage right there if you're going with a Toxin Progenitor. If you're like me, and you're going for an impact progenitor, you have to make viral on here. So you're going to go back to just putting your toxin mod on it. So we're just going to plop on Pistol Pestilence back there. And we're going to have, Frostbite, Pistol Pestilence for toxin. We're going to have our viral. And then we're going to have our impact progenitor. Now, the negative thing about the impact progenitor is that you don't get a free mod slot like you do with toxin. And the positive thing with the impact progenitor is that you get more natural slash procs. So it's kind of up to you, whatever you want to use. I think if you have a Riven, it is better to go with a toxin progenitor. If you don't have a Riven, it's kind of up to you. Do you want more natural slash procs? Do you want a free mod slot? Whatever you like. All right, I have overly explained that. The Exilus slot is going to be steady hands for negative weapon recoil. And the Arcane slot is going to be secondary Merciless for 360% damage increase and a plus 30% reload speed. Just because the weapon has a really low magazine capacity, so you're reloading pretty often. So I think secondary Merciless is better. Secondary Deadhead's also a good option. It's also 360% damage increase. You just get a little bit more headshot multiplier with it. So you can choose either secondary Merciless or secondary Deadhead. I personally like Merciless, but that is up to you. And I think that's it. I think I have completely overly explained this. And I hope you guys like the video. If you like it, give it a like. And thank you. You guys have a good day. Bye.